Okay, so at this point in the build, you should have both of your wings completed with the carbon spars inserted here and the other spot underneath this fold. We have both of the leading edges folded over on the wings, so they're folded and glued to create that KFM step. Okay, and so our wings are pretty much done, at least as far as the foam goes. Now you notice I don't have the carbon spars in my wings again because when I'm making this video I don't have enough carbon spars. They're en route, but you'll have two in each wing, so under the fold and right here in the back. So we're going to set the wings aside and focus on the fuselage of the aircraft for a second here. And so it looks like this when you get it. And the end result is going to basically be a tube, a square tube. So we can kind of guess how this is going to go. But a couple of things to be aware of is that these cuts up here, let's see, up here are meant to be all the way through. So that's meant to be separate along here. That's intentional. And then we do have some cuts that are not all the way through the foam board. And those are, found along here and here and here. There's one along here as well. There's some around here, okay? And there's a couple slits here in the back that will let us create a V shape on the tail of the aircraft. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and peel out all of these sections where there are two lines close together. So here we're going to see two close together. I'm going to peel out that middle section of foam here, here, right along here, and then this section up here, not quite too next to each other because the one's cut off, but you'll still want to peel that section off as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and do that. All right, so I've picked out some of this foam and I saved a couple sections to show you live on the camera. I figured I'd do that as well, but this is just what you pick out of there. And so when you have these sections of the foam that you need to peel out, what I'll typically do is I'll kind of crack it on that section, and then I'll fold it over about 180 degrees, and I'll start to kind of pull at it with my fingernails along here. Let's see. And you kind of just want to get it to start breaking off. And once it gets broken off pretty well along there, you can fold it even more. Get a full 180 degree fold on there. Let's see, just a second here. Okay. And once we get that full 180 degrees, we can kind of just roll it off. And it's a little bit hard to see with the focus here. It just kind of rolls off. And now we're left with that nice cavity in there where we'll be folding it up and add some glue. One of the parts a little bit tricky is this end piece here. And so I figured I'd show you this. Again, you just kind of need to roll it off. Maybe use your fingernails to get a grip in between that little cut line there so you don't bend the rest of the foam, but just peel the part off you want. Since this goes around the corner, it's going to be a little bit trickier, but you can kind of roll off the first half and then the second half, and there we go. Okay. And this piece along here will be similar, you're just rolling it right off the paper. There's not like a other side, of course, in this one. We'll kind of crack it open there, and just roll it right off, and it should peel off pretty easily. And there's a little piece here as well on the end. Peel that off. All right. So now that that's all cleared out, we can get ready to fold the fuselage up. I'm going to pause right here and grab some other supplies I'm going to show you kind of in combination with this fold. All right, I wanted to give you kind of an idea of what we're moving towards here because that might help you when you're laying things up, that you make sure you don't get things the wrong way. So I've grabbed my two wings here. So I'm going to pull these off for a second. So here is our piece we just picked the foam out of, right? Here is basically the, we'll say the skeleton of the plane. And so we have some of these 3D printed truss type pieces there. And then we have the square carbon rod. I just have one of them right now, but there are 4 of them you'll need to use to create this brace piece. Okay, the brace piece will go inside the aircraft, and we're going to install it, I believe, as we're folding it to allow us to not have to try to slide it in after. Because what's going to happen is the brace piece will be sitting in the aircraft more or less like so, and we'll talk about some adjustments here in a second. The foam will fold up in this manner, and then we'll be able to create a fuselage like this. Okay, this piece at the front and this piece at the back will be glued down, but the middle will be kind of an access hatch. Since that whole middle will be an access hatch for our flight controller assembly, Okay, it'll get placed in there. We want to have some extra strength, so that's what this truss piece, truss kind of skeleton is for. And so if we say, well, how do you figure out where to glue the skeleton piece? That's what these wings are in the view for here. So in the end result here, we're going to have our plane folded up. The smaller wing goes on front with the folded over section being on top. You can see those 4 holes on the bottom are going to line up with the 4 holes, or the 4 tabs here. Okay. So we'll line that up a little bit. Of course, we'll glue this later, but just to get the idea here. There we go. And then the back will actually be seated under the fuselage. So the front wing is on top of the fuselage. The back wing is on beneath the fuselage. And there's those 4 holes, and there's 4 tabs on the bottom of the fuselage. Okay, you can't see those as well. There goes a couple. They're actually staggered, right? Because we're going on the top wing this time. So the cutouts on the top of the fold are higher up or taller than the bottom. Okay, so we'll attach that to the rear wing with those tabs. And it does, you know, kind of hold a little bit just with friction. We can kind of pick up the plane here and see where we're headed. Okay. Now, the reason why I mention all this is because when we finish installing electronics on the plane, we're going to have some servos that move the control surfaces here in the front as well as the back. Okay. And so when we're setting up this skeleton piece in here, we want to make sure we get these spaced in the right position. There's not like a specific, you know, we don't have any markings in the aircraft for you to line these up with, but you can place them how you see fit to some extent. Okay. What we're going to want to do is make sure that the carbon rod here that doesn't interfere with the servos, and that these 3D printed pieces are, you know, spaced decently for our ability to access the flight control board. Okay, which will probably be somewhere in here. And then we'll have the lead that goes towards the front of the aircraft, the battery lead to plug the aircraft in. And so when you're spacing these out, of course, you can't glue the spars so far back that they interfere with the bottom wing here. And the servos are going to be found in the front and back. So I'll show you where those are found. Okay, so if you kind of imagine on this control or this wing, these cutouts here. So there's the tab, 1, 2, and then a cutout. Let me zoom in a little bit maybe. Okay, so 1, 2, cutout, 1, 2, cutout. Those cutouts are for the servos. Okay. Now the way this truss piece is made, there is a carbon rod that's going to go on top as well. And so what we don't want to do is have that carbon rod that's on the top be glued in such a way that it extends into this cutout right there, because then the servo won't be able to fit in there. So we have to have the carbon rod at least far enough back that we can clear our servos into this space when we glue the carbon rod into these trusses. Okay, so that's in the front. We're watching out for that for the servos in the front. And in the back, let's scoot this over a little bit. Kind of a similar thing, but a little bit in reverse. In the back, oops, a little bit farther here, there are, let me lift this up, okay, some cutouts on the bottom. So we'll look at the bottom here. Again, we have a, let's move this, tab, cutout. Okay, that's where the servo is going to go in the back. And so we just want to make sure when we install this, now it's not quite as big of an issue, I guess you could say, in the back, because the carbon spars don't rest on the bottom of the, let's open this up, on the bottom of the fuselage. They just rest about the midpoint and then the top. Okay, that one fell down. Hold on a second here. Okay, so it's not quite as big of a deal in the back because the carbon spars don't rest on the bottom of the fuselage where the servo is going to be. They're high enough up that if we lay this out, okay, roughly like that, we shouldn't have any interference. It should go right over the servo. Okay, it's not going to interfere with this cutout. But we do want to make sure we don't run into any other issues as far as that goes with the servo. Additionally, this piece right here, so these lines, okay, are going to get crushed. Here, I'll just show you real quick. Going to get crushed like this and bent up to help us form our tail. So when the plane is up, we'll have a tail. The tail piece will kind of come in this V shape. And if that makes sense, we'll fold this other side in as well. So you can't have the carbon rod sticking out too far that it gets into the spot here that needs to fold. So those are things to watch out for with this whole kind of assembly. A little bit complex to show you because it's not all laid up yet, but I want to give you some of the ideas of what I'm operating off of and how you can do this. So when we build our little truss skeleton here, we want to make sure our carbon rods are behind these cutouts here, in front of these cutouts here, as well as in front of these lines here, which should basically be the same thing. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to glue the skeleton frame here together first and get it kind of all lined up and nice with our 90 degrees and everything. So it looks something like, hold on here. It's like pickup sticks. Could be something like this with all 4 of these installed. Of course, see if I can install this without wrecking the whole thing. Yeah, anyways, you get the idea. It'll be something like that with the spacing as you see fit. You can move these around a little bit if you want to, but the general idea being our flight control module should easily fit in one of the sections because that's the section we'll need to install it into. Okay. The other sections aren't as big of a deal, though you will have some thinking to do later with how you place those in relation to wiring your motors to your ESC. And so that will be something you'll think about as well, but that can be done after the fact when you route your motor wires from each wing into the fuselage to wherever your ESC is at. I think what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to have the flight controller module here, roughly in the center of the plane. And then we have my ESC and or ESC wires are going to be underneath it in a little stack configuration, and then the motor wires can just run in through here, through the front, or around through here in the back to that central location. We will have a battery lead coming from the ESC out towards the front of the plane. And as the battery compartment will largely be made up of the front or the nose of the plane. We look here, right, in roughly this area under the front wing. Okay, will be more or less where our battery will reside to help us get our center of gravity appropriate for the plane and things like that. You could potentially adjust things and have a little more space for your battery, which might not be a bad idea. Have the trusses a little closer together there. It's kind of flexible, but I'm giving you some general ideas so you can make a decision based on what you see. So at this point, I'm going to start folding up the fuselage body of the aircraft, have my hot glue gun heated up, and what we're going to do on the body of the aircraft is focus on the 2 sides first, not at the same time, but we'll do those first before we worry about the top pieces. And so in this fuselage, these are going to be what are called B-folds in the flight test world of foam airplanes. And what that means is when I take the side, I'm going to fold it up beside, B for beside the bottom, and the same thing on this side. So what that looks like, let's see if I can get this under the camera here, is when I fold this up, sorry, it's out of focus, it's not going to go up on top or above the bottom like this. It's going to come up and be beside the bottom like this. Okay, so not above the bottom piece, but beside, like that. And that's going to create the correct dimensions for the plane. So when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and run a bead of glue along this gap, leaving about a 1/4 inch at each side. And I'm then going to take the body of the aircraft and fold it up like this to keep that side piece on the table. And again, it's going to create this beside fold. I'll show you when I'm done. But once I'm got that up in position, I'm going to hold it at 90 degrees, grab my square, or you can grab like a roll of tape or something, just something that's 90 degrees to hold that in position. So you get a nice, perfect 90-degree fold while it's gluing. Okay, we'll do that with both sides, and I'll show you the result. So here I am folding or gluing one of the sides. I have my tape here to keep a 90-degree angle, and actually decided to flip it the other way on the table. So I have the main fuselage down. This side is folded up, and I got that backwards in the last clip. I apologize. It's easier to do it this way because then you can press down on this shorter piece and make sure it's flush against the table for our beside fold, our B fold. So once that gets cooled off enough that we can, let it go and it holds its position, it should be pretty good. There's our beside fold there. Again, sorry for the focus. Try to get it to, I don't know if it's focused that close to the camera. You can kind of see this piece here is beside the bottom piece. We're going to do the same thing on this other side. End up with a nice, basically a U shape like that. Okay. So I'll kind of show you this one a little bit more live, we'll say. Sorry, I got some hot glue there on the table. Go ahead and run our bead of glue along here. Make sure you have enough glue to do the joint before you start so you don't run out. I'm almost running out here, but we're going to make it. Okay. In this case, I'm going to leave it flat on the table and fold this up beside. Okay, and again, this way I can kind of press down on it to make sure it's beside the bottom, and then I'll put my roll of tape here so I get a nice 90 degrees so I can push against the tape and make sure things are staying nice and angled correctly. All right, that's looking pretty good there. So there's the basis of our fuselage. All right, and I'm going to hold it a little bit longer here. But the next step is going to be to glue these little tabs down in the front and in the back so that we have our completed square. And then we'll have this flap here as kind of a door access hatch for the to access the internals of the plane once we have it assembled. Okay, that feels pretty good. So with these little tabs here, what you want to do is, let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we have the void we created here, where we peeled the foam out there, and then we have some foam we peeled out here as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take the big access hatch and kind of fold it back right now, so it's the little tab sticking up. We're going to put a little bit of glue in here, and then we'll put a little bit of glue on this kind of corner between the paper here and the foam. That way we can set this down, make sure it sits nice and flush. Oops, sorry, nice and flush, and hold it in place there to glue it. Now the glue is going to be really hot, so you can't really hold it with your finger that well. So I'd recommend getting a piece of foam or something else to try to hold it in place, especially on this side with a little paper flap. So we get a nice bond there, and you want to kind of squeeze things in place, but not too hard because then it will push this down like that, and we don't want to glue it like that either. Of course, we want it to be sitting right on the edge there, right on top, to give us a nice square build of the fuselage. Let's zoom out. Okay, so we'll do this one, then I'll do the other one the same way in just a second. Got enough glue left for this guy, so we'll go ahead and run this here. Bead of glue right here. And a little bit of glue right here. Again, it's pretty hot, so don't have your finger on the paper because it will not feel good. And this is going to sit, oops, see, I did exactly what I was telling you guys not to. There it goes. It's going to sit down right on top of that. So I'm going to take a piece of scrap foam and kind of press on the whole thing in order to hopefully, there we go, hopefully keep it nice and flat while I'm gluing. It's going to be really hard for you guys to see that. There we go. Okay. And just kind of wipe across it so we don't stick the scrap foam to that piece, but that should glue fairly quickly since there's not a lot of glue there. And then I'll do the same with the back. The only difference there is that it is kind of got these angles on it. Okay, so we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, now onto this back kind of small flap section. Now I actually forgot before I glued the fuselage into this U shape to crease the back here to create this folded V like I have on the top. I forgot to crease it on this side. That's okay though, I can still get in there decently well. Just want to find that little line, there, and crease along that line. I'm going to use my marker to kind of sneak in there and do that. And once you've creased it a little bit, it should be pretty easy to fold it into the shape we need. Okay, so you can see both of these. We're going to go back and form more or less a kind of a point at the end there. And that basically the way we'll get that is by lining up with this top piece here and folding together. So like so. So this one will be a little bit more complicated than the front one was. But basically what we can do is we can go around, around this piece here and put some glue. Okay, just around the paper here. So here, here, and here, and here. Some glue there. We'll fold it over, make it match up with the other side as far as the parallel sides are. And then we can then bring these angled sides in, make sure we're pressing down and pinching those in at the same time, and then just let the whole thing dry together in that shape. Okay, so again, just watch your fingers. The glue's obviously pretty hot. So we'll go ahead and do this all at once here. Grab another glue stick before, not quite. Okay, so get some glue here. You don't need like a ton of glue, so it's just going to squish out if you put too much glue, just a small bead around there. We'll flip this over, set it down there on the other side. Oops. Pinch these two sides in. Make sure we're getting contact everywhere. It's pretty hot, but that's okay. And we're going to kind of press down that whole thing together. So we see we're getting the good contact there on all kind of four sides of it, I guess you could say. Don't push down too hard in the middle, or else you'll press it up. Like I mentioned, the other one, we can get a piece of foam and kind of go over the top, just to give us a nice level surface to press with instead of pushing too hard in the middle of the plane. And once it sets up, then you're pretty good. All right, so we have the back section glued now, as well as this front section up here. And so we can see the body of the plane is kind of coming together here. There's a tube shape there, spots for our wings and stuff like that. Our flight control module can, you can see how that can sit in the plane. It's a pretty tight fit, but it does fit. So I got an ESC connector in the way here that's kind of making it tilted, but fits right in there. Okay, we'll be installing that later. But you can imagine that's going to slide in. This is our access hatch here, so we can plug things in, plug in the USB cable, do configuration changes and things like that. Okay, and then we can also take our tail and see how that's going to fit. We haven't really looked at that yet. The tail is going to slide right into this spot back here. Okay, but we'll have the wing in there as well, which will help it line up. Should throw that in there. There's our wing. There's our wing in the back. As you can see, there's a notch in the wing, and then a notch on this top piece for the tail to slide into, or I guess you should say the vertical stabilizer. So if we slide that into the plane, lots of scratchy foam sounds here on the microphone. I apologize. That's going to fit. There we go. Just like that. Okay, it's going to slide into those notches. So it's really coming together now. We have nearly the whole plane complete. We're not going to start gluing the wings on yet, but I'm going to show you the kind of the final sub-assembly, we'll say, which will be the little nose cap. Okay, so we're going to jump into that next. All right, so in this video, or this section of the video, I should say, I'm going to do the nose cap for the plane, or the nose piece. So we have these two pieces here of foam. I've already peeled out the foam from this one here, but same thing here. We're going to peel out the foam that's inside of those double lines. So what I usually do is I just kind of snap it open. Okay, snap it open, and then we start using our fingernail or something else that I don't know what you want to use there, but I usually use my fingernail to kind of peel this foam out, and we'll peel that out all along those double lines. So it just happens on this one here and then this one here. These two don't have anything you peel out. All right, so I peeled the foam out of both the triangle shaped pieces and this square shaped piece. So just like we did the fuselage with, we're going to have a couple folds here. But before we fold it up, we want to grab our marker or whatever you use for this and crush along these lines. Okay, because this part's going to need to fold in to create kind of our pyramid shape of the nose here. So I'm going to crush these ahead of time because it's going to be hard to crush them after I glue this into a square. And make sure we can fold them up. Okay, lift it off the table there. Crush this one a little bit more. Okay, and get that foam flexing before we fold it. So if you imagine that this is, say, the bottom of the plane, just like on the fuselage, we're going to fold it beside, and then this one's going to flip over the top, just like that, and latch in. So we have our square shape there, and then these will all fold in into a kind of, like I said, like a pyramid shape in the front of the plane. So let's see if we can get this. My foam didn't pick out as clean as I thought it would. So if you have any residue foam, so I have some residue foam here on the paper, the ones on the paper, make sure you remove that. You kind of just try to slice it a little bit with a blade, try not to cut through the paper, and pick some of that out with maybe your fingernail. Kind of roll it out. We want to have a clean, oops, I didn't even show you any of that, sorry. Then kind of slice it through with a blade there, and then pick it out with your fingernail. So you have a nice clean paper there because that's like the mating surface between this piece and the piece that's going to be next to it. So that should give us a little bit of a cleaner fold up once we put this together here and fold the nose in. That surface I just cleaned up can now lay a little bit flatter with our nose here when we glue that together. And then we'll have our little nose cone. And this piece here is meant to go kind of in between the fuselage and the nose. And so this nose would fit on here, and the other side of this would be the fuselage. I'll show you that in a second. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to fold up the nose as far as these small flat sections. So we'll get into kind of a square shape first. And then I'll go ahead and focus one by one on these sections here, adding some glue, folding it in, folding it in, folding it in like so. All right. Since it's so small, it's going to be a little bit fiddly, unfortunately, just because there's not very much there to actually glue. So we're going to want to be careful on this part we don't burn our fingers, and also that we use something to keep it in a nice 90-degree angle, especially since these pieces can easily tilt forward and back like that because of the small surface area. Okay, so I'm going to treat this like the bottom. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, just pick one of them to be the bottom. And so we're going to fold up beside the bottom. Okay, so there's a teeny amount of glue here. I'm going to fold this up and again try to keep it nice and flat and flush and 90 degrees. A little bit finicky, but of course this is mostly an aesthetic piece, I guess. Maybe a little bit of aerodynamics, but not a lot to worry about here. If you mess this up a little bit, the plane's still going to be fine. So I'll fold one of those up beside, like so. Maybe a little bit more time to dry. I'll do the other one, then we'll come back into the video at that point. All right. So I have the two sides kind of glued here. We're just going to add some glue in this crevice here and on top of the flat here, and then we'll seat this piece into its place just like that to create our square nose. So while I was gluing this, I thought I'd share it. It was helpful to glue and then flip it over and kind of just press it on the table. As long as you don't have too much glue in there, it shouldn't glue itself to the table, and it makes it easy to hold it nice and flat to do this process. Once you're done, you have your square here, so we can start to focus on the pyramid part of this, I guess. And this process is going to be pretty similar to everything else we've already done. You're just going to have to kind of do multiple pieces at a time. You have the pieces with paper and the pieces without paper. And so the pieces without paper are going to need to go line up on the edges of the pieces with paper, of course, in order for us to do that. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to go ahead and put a bead of glue on this piece of paper. I'm going to crunch these together so they are meeting. And that way I can kind of hold that on the table. That makes sense, hard for you to see, but holding it down on the table at that angle that it needs to meet this other piece. And that allows me to press down on it and keep that nice and tight while it's drying. Then I can just go rotate through and do the next one, attach, next seam, attach, next seam, attach, and kind of hold each one down against the table to get a nice glue bond there and a good angle. So just to pause mid-glue here, I got one seam glued. So again, I'll just go over to the next one, press it down. Again, holding it down against the table allows you to press it flat and then push in to get the piece to fold in while you're holding it. Really easy to do it that way, and then we'll go around the whole entire thing. And here's our completed nose cone. Just a little pyramid shape, and that we'll be able to install in the front of our plane. Let me grab the plane here. Oops, tail's holding it together. There we go. Oops. All right, so the front of our plane here. Now you notice that this is the same size as the fuselage. So you're like, well, that doesn't go in there. Not meant to. That's what this other little piece is for. So this will create kind of an interface, we'll say. Once we fold it up, it will fit. Sorry, let's get this the right way here. It fit right inside the nose of the plane, more or less like so. Okay, and we'll end up gluing it about halfway. So we have some on the plane and then some for the nose to go over. If that makes sense. All right, so let's take a look at this with the fuselage kind of in conjunction here, this piece. So you notice that these pieces aren't the same dimensions, right? This is longer than this one and so on and so forth. So when we put this in, we want to make sure we figure out which way is the right way to put it in. And as you can see there, the smaller piece out of these four is the one that goes on the bottom or the top, we could say. I'm going to end up putting mine on the bottom, I think. But we'll have the bottom there. And so these side pieces will go beside. Okay, they're going to fold up beside. Not on top, but beside. Okay, and a 90, of course. And once we do that, then we'll be able to slide this piece in here. And it should fit nice and snug, just like that. You can see it's, sorry, I just can't get it under the camera enough here. You can see it's going to fit right in there, just like that. And that'll again give us an interface to put the nose on too. So I'm going to move this aside for a second. We're going to use this one as the bottom in my case. And you would probably want to do the same. I'm just going to add a little bit of glue here to this piece. Okay, I'm going to fold it up and make sure we have a little tape or something to get a nice 90 off of so we don't mess that up. And we'll just press down on the foam as well as pressing it into the tape. So get a nice 90-degree fold. And I'll go ahead and do that on both sides and I'll show you the result. All right, so I've glued two glue joints. Three of the sides are now in position so we can see it slides right in here. It's going to slip into the front of the plane, and this last part here will get glued down there. And I'm going to take it out of the plane to glue that, of course, is showing you how it's fitting. It's going to be nice and flush with where the wing's going to mount right on top. So I want to make sure, especially this last piece here, we get it glued down nice and level. It's not sticking up or anything because that would interfere with the wing. All right, so for the last part here, we're just going to add some glue in here, and then I'm going to put some glue on top of this piece. I'm going to fold it over so it's aligned, and then I'm actually going to press it into the table to keep it aligned so it stays nice 90s. If you don't put too much glue on there, it shouldn't glue itself to the table, so just be aware of that. You don't need a ton of glue on this to get it to join together. You stop a little bit short of the edges whenever you're gluing, then it helps the glue to not squeeze out outside of the joint you're trying to glue. So we're going to fold it down in between and down there. So just like that. So it's a square. I'm going to press that down onto the table and let it dry.